Welcome, everyone. We are in conversation today with Faduma and Dionne. And maybe we'll just give ourselves a couple of minutes and then we can roll through. And as people join us, they will catch what they catch, and then they can always catch the replay. Yeah, which will be available on our 2SydneyStylists page and our Instagram in some days as well, because we are generous. So let's see. Oh yeah, no, people are definitely already rolling through. You know what? I'm just going to start. As we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are joining you, Wanyika and I, that is, from Gadigal land and Faduma, of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I recognize that sovereignty has never been ceded, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and those who are paving the way before us. And as always, to any First Nations people who will be joining us online, we extend our deepest respects and warmest welcomes. For those of you who are familiar, welcome to Sydney Stylist Conversations. This is a live interview series that we started, well, I guess in the peak of COVID, because that's what everyone did. We wanted to stay connected. And my name is Niwa, and we have Wanyika on the screen as well. Together, we're 2SydneyStylists. And today we're joined by Faduma Geddi and Dionne Davis. And this is part of a new series for us, which has been generously supported by the City of Parramatta Council through our wonderful friends at Starts. And it's part of a series called The Show Must Go On, because indeed it must. So in this series, we're basically wanting to go deeper and push the dial further on just conversations in general, those that are happening on a very global level, those that are happening in our personal lives. And we want to just add more richness, more nuance, more depth in what we talk about, so that people can gain practical steps in how they can navigate those areas and themes in their everyday lives, basically, because we don't want to have the same conversation in about 5 to 10 years time. So that's the goal. and I have no doubt we'll achieve that today. So for all you tuned in, you are very welcome to comment and engage with us through the Facebook live chat comment section. And if you see me look anytime, that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at that. But just chime in at any point and we'll definitely weave that into this conversation. And just very quickly, in regards to our wonderful guests, these two people are, well, earlier on I said they're big champions of us. So we're, of course, we had to have them so that they could talk really nice things about us. Faduma is a very dear friend, this is full disclosure, of Wanyika and I. She is actually the silent S in 2SydneyStylists.
I love it.
There's many S's and she's all of them. She also happens to be just an incredible woman, someone who has extensive experience working with marginalized communities, women, refugees from African communities, with a very broad focus from health, education, and she's just incredibly passionate about amplifying those voices of those women and their extended families. And she has dedicated her time across many organizations and currently is the Vice President of African Women of Australia. And Dionne is another powerhouse. She is a Black American expat. She is a stay-at-home mama, and she's from Baltimore, Maryland. And she's really passionate about some incredibly vast topics, amongst which are parenting, Blackness, breastfeeding, womanism, equity, race. You see where we're going? Travel, immigration. She's just a wealth of information, and she's always so generous. So we're really looking forward to what she has to share and contribute to this discussion. I think I'm going to hand over to you now, Wanyika.
Oh, cool. So welcome, ladies. So today's topic, oh my gosh, I don't even know if you covered that. Like,
oh my gosh, yeah, I don't think I have. Please do
please. back to you. She's trying to pass the baton too quickly. It's a relay. I hand it back.
You're right. Thank you. What are we talking about today? We are talking about something that we all have, names. We are talking about what they mean. We're talking about how they shape our realities, our identities, and we are really just drawing on from our collective lived experience, which is a lot of them. There's 4 of us, but there's about 100 lived experiences in this room. So that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So I was like, yeah, then that leads to what I have to say. So if you happened to join us last week, we were very much grounded in academia and research based. But as Nua has pointed out, this conversation is going to be predominantly on lived experience. But that doesn't mean that we've not done our research and going to throw in numbers here and there. You know, just part of the process. So in saying that, so talking names, you know, how you're named, where your names come from, the meaning, political nuances, you know, assimilation, like there's literally a plethora of ways that we can take this. But before we get started, I just wanted to ground us in this. So I found this really interesting article on BBC, and it was talking about African naming traditions. And it had like about 9 ways that we do name, and we might touch on this in our own individual experiences. But I just thought it was a fun way to kind of get us grounded in this topic. So the first one was, and I'll go through them really quickly, yeah? So the first one was events surrounding birth. And there's some ethnic groups who pick out names influenced by positive or negative circumstances the family find themselves in around the time the child is born. And often such names are complete sentences. So, you know, like there's an example of, say, there's an isiZulu name, Lindiwe, which often is given to a baby girl after a long line of boys, yeah? In Kenya, there's Cheptanui, and those are often given to babies whose mothers have suffered extreme difficulties during childbirth in the Kalenjin ethnic group, yeah? And then there's others where kids are named after emotional warnings. So some names, especially in Zimbabwe, reflect the mood or circumstance of the family at the time of birth. So some of them serve as warnings or rebukes. So for example, a name like Manyara tells someone you have been humbled. There's another name, Maide, I hope I'm saying that right. And it asks the question, what did you want? Okay. Oh. And then, yeah, interesting, huh?
That's beautiful, yes. Yeah.
And then we get to celebrity culture. Now this one is so, yeah, this is me, where I come from, my people. So this is Kenya, and it's the Luo tribe in Kenya. And so they're known, they're notorious for adopting names of famous people. So like, for example, when after 2008, Barack Obama's election, like almost every person in a certain village was called Barack Obama, you know, and they do that. Like it's known, it's something that we laugh about, we love them for it. And then so in this article, it also says that when Obama visited the country in 2015, it's reportedly named that a mother named her child Air Force One. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So there's order of birth, and this one we might have come across, like so like in the Ghanaian community, they have unisex names like Panin or Kankra, so if you're twins, which basically means older and younger. So with that, you can identify where the order of birth, yeah. There's day-born names, and again, leaning heavily towards the Ghanaian ethnic groups like Akan, Ga, Iwe, and Zema. So they automatically assign names based on the day of the week the child was born. So this doesn't mean that they don't have other names, but in some sequence they'll have one. So for example, if you're born on Tuesday, if you're a boy, you'd be called Kwabena. A female, you'd be called Abena. If you're born on a Thursday as a male, you'd be called Yao. And as a female, you'd be called Ya. And I found this really interesting because we do know friends, and you're like, oh, no, I get where this is going, you know, kind of gives you some sort of reference. Yeah, I'm almost done. So there's faith-based names. I feel like I'll be talking forever. I'm like, I want to guess.
No, go on.
No, I'm enjoying it very much.
Yes.
Okay, so there was faith-based names. So then across the continent, several local names have religious links. And among the Igbo and Yoruba ethnic tribes in Nigeria, a name that starts or ends with Chi, Chuku, or Olua have some kind of reference to God. Faduma, can you stop laughing? Stop choking on your water. As I said, Igbo and Yoruba, people were like, But this is a story for another day.
Yes, yes.
In Ethiopia, there's a name, female name, Hail Mariam, which means the power of Mary, and Makafui in Togo, Benin, from the Iwe ethnic group, which means I praise God. And I know, Dionne, you touched a little bit about, religious names or religious names with religious connotations, right? Okay, then the second last one, day and night. Again, drawing back to Kenyan ethnic tribe, where they're quite specific with the naming. So for example, they go all the way from, if you were born during dawn, you're called Omondi. If it was mid-morning, and specific to mid-morning, you're Onyango. If it was just morning, you're Okinyi. If it was a sunny midday, it's Ochien. If it was at night, it's Ochieno.
I love this.
If it was midnight, it's Wadwar. So quite specific timings.
Yes.
Those names. So all the names that I mentioned were male, but if it was female, you add an A in front of it. So Akinyi, Anyango, Achieng, that sort of reference.
I love Anyango, and that's when my child was born, mid-morning. I love that.
Anyango, yeah.
I love that.
And then
I might have to add a name.
Sorry?
He's already got 4. I might have to add a name if they let me.
To your inherit one. And then there's meet the ancestors, which I think is very common, especially in the Bantu tribes that we are from, where you're named after grandparents, whether living or not living. But across the continent, there's different ways of doing it. Some people, if you're named after your grandparents, they say you cannot speak the name if they're still alive, so you can't be called your grandparents' name until they pass on, whereas others, it's just a sign of honor. So whether they have passed on or still alive, then you can be called out that name. So the different nuances depending on the different the different sections. And then this last one is actually a Somalian naming system, and apparently you've got rude nicknames, Faduma. So
yes, we do.
It has a unique system, and apparently these names can actually show up in your passports or your official.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
True.
So I wouldn't call it rude. I would call it very blunt. So my people are very blunt. So in Somalia, I guess something that you would consider maybe not politically correct, but if you have a limp, for example, people will add that to your name. They might, which is not correct. Obviously, wouldn't be able to say that in Australia or any other country. But culturally, if someone has a particular disability or a birthmark, then they are named after that as a nickname, and that tends to stick. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even though,
but it's not in a.
No, go ahead.
But it's not, sorry, I just wanted to also add that it's not, I guess, done or used in a derogatory manner. It's very much becomes part of that person's name and personality and how people engage. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, listening to that, it reminded me, because Black Americans do that, where it won't even be, it's a nickname, but it's not given to you by your family or, like a traditional naming process, but it's either an event or a ability or disability, a characteristic. And that's who you are. And your legal name, your government name could be Walter, but they're going to call you whatever that characteristic, that attribute is. So even though most Black Americans who are descended from chattel slavery, that was mainly West Africans, something that's very East African,
it's also used as endearing as well. So for example, one of my uncles, his name is Said, but then his nickname that's been given is Ebma'ikenisit, which basically means, if translated, will never bring you shame. So it's to, I guess, describe a person of high integrity as well. So his name is Said, who will never bring you shame. So
so it goes both ways.
It's interesting though, Dionne, that there is so much similarity across the continent. And not just across the continent, but with African, African American culture as well, and communities and how we relate to each other.
Totally. Like, and like as you were describing it, I'm like, yo, we do that. Like, we definitely do that. And you were stuck with that name, so you better hope that it's you know. And I mean, again, it's not necessarily derogatory. It's just descriptive. It's accurate.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And humorous. So just to wrap that up, so it's interesting because Limpy was one of the names. And I'm not sure, I'm gonna butcher this in Somali, Langare.
Yes.
And then so in this research though, they were like most names to the guys were more descriptive and potentially derogatory, but then again in a humorous way. But
the context.
But the nicknames for the women were always the nicest ones, you know, like I like this one, Darali, which is gazelle eyes. Oh.
Yes. Yes. Oh, Kalanja Khorder. Kalanja Khorder is also another term that you use to describe women. It means the woman with the most beautiful neck.
Oh.
So so it's for, you know, to describe a beautiful woman, you might say she's tall and beautiful. Yeah.
And she gets that as a nickname. Yeah. So that is it. So the interesting ways and the different ways we can get to naming. And so then that brings me to you ladies, if we can get into your names. So what I'll do is I'll get you to tell us your full names, hidden government. I've already made peace with my government names coming out today. So
Have you?
Tell us about your names and how your names came about. Do they have meaning? Do they follow any of the 9 naming conventions, or maybe not? Just where you are. Maybe we'll start with you, Faduma.
So my name is Faduma, which is an African or East African version of the name Fatima originally. So, and Fatima is one of the Prophet's daughter's names in the Islamic religion. So it is an Arabic name that has been, adopted in my culture. So my name is Faduma or Fadumo. And you have similar names, of course, in West African countries as well, like Fatmata, Fatima. So there's different variations of Fatma. So there's different variations of the name itself. So my name is Faduma. That's my first name. I do have another name as well, which is Fozia. But essentially in my culture, so I'm originally from Somalia, we have names, all our names often have 3 parts that you're given. And it's very specific to the individual. So your first name is whatever your parents would like to call you. And the second name is the child's father. So my dad's name is Yusuf. So my name is Faduma Yusuf. And then the third name of the child is often the paternal grandfather. So Geddi is my great grandfather's name. So we'd name children based, so you'd be given your name, and then you have your father's name and your grandfather's name. So often you'll find in my culture, or in Somalia, that siblings, both male and female, will share the same second and third name. And women, when they marry, they do not change their names. And so by keeping the name of the father and the grandfather, they are in effect, I guess, maintaining your affiliation to your clan and your family from your father's side. Yeah. But in my culture, I guess we also have, we're taught from a very young age your entire name. So it could be up to 9, 10 ancestors. Some people know much more than I do, but I can count up 10 names. So you're often taught in the Somali culture when you're young, your entire name. So your father's name, grandfather's, great-great-great-grandfather's name, up to 10 generations. And I guess it's often something that we say when at time of distress. I think that, you told me
you have pulled all the names for us once before.
I did. So oftentimes, you're taught from a young age, this is your entire name. And you're taught who your tribe is and your clan and the people that you come from. And so when you are, I guess, distressed or worried or, I guess, anxious about something, you can often recite your entire name, basically. That's what we do. So you recite your entire name. And I think it's just a beautiful reminder that, you come from people and that there are people behind you and you're not on your own, I guess, in this world. So, so oftentimes Somali people, if they're even shocked or surprised, they might say, "Is this happening to me?" And then you say your entire full name. So
we've seen it.
Yeah, and is that something that you can share with us in this forum, or is that asking too much?
No, not at all. I can say my full name. It's Faduma.
Say it the way you say it, with that passion that we felt you say. Like, you don't know, I'm invoking all my ancestors.
Yeah, that's right. So you'd say my name. It's Faduma Yusuf Geddi Mohammed Ali Abdi Wahiliya. So I'd say the whole name. Yeah,
I love that.
Love it.
Yeah, and yeah. So that's my name and sort of background.
I have to relocate. Sorry.
That's all right.
It's all right.
It's okay.
Do you want to share now, Dionne, or do you want one of us to
Sure. Just give me 1 moment.
Okay, cool. Absolutely.
Sorry.
Yeah. Faduma, that is a part of your culture that I honestly really admire. Like, because I can just feel like every time you've said it in our presence, I cannot just feel how you're just like everyone, you're just standing on shoulders of giants.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, that's a bit close.
Good, you're good.
Hopefully my signal's still good in here.
Yeah.
There we go.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, so
what about you, Dionne?
So my parents didn't know. I don't even know if they could have found out the gender, but because I'm old, but they did not. And again, they sort of presumed that I was going to be a boy, and their deal was that if I was a boy, my mother got to name me, and if I was a girl, my father got to name me. So, fine, they're cruising along. Well, I just happened to be born 13 days early, so I was 2 weeks before my birth, my due date, and it was a very quick birth, very quick delivery, and so I pop a girl. And my dad was totally unprepared. He didn't have anything in mind, right? So they're literally right there. And I think in the U.S. at the time, they may still do this practice, but they sort of put a lot of pressure on you to name the child quickly. So he's like going through. So like I said, I'm old. I was born in 1973. So 1973. Of course, my surname is Davis, so they're like Angela, Angela Davis, and which I would have rocked proudly, right?
Would have.
But then like, no, didn't like that, and I think they tried a few others. I don't recall them. And then finally, my dad heard a Dionne Warwick song, and he's like Dionne, and boom. So then we get to the middle name. And my father has a very pretentious name, especially for a Black boy from Lynchburg, Virginia, who, doesn't have a trust fund. So his name is Owen Walker Davis III. And, so my grandfather was junior, and my great grandfather was the first one. So I'm like, how do you not have a name like that and not have a law firm? Like, like come on, man. You need a trust fund. You need some ducats behind that name. So he really didn't want me to have a middle name. He was like, she doesn't need a middle name. Dionne Davis is fine. She doesn't. And of course, my mother being my mother, she's like, what about her monogram? So I legally have the initial J, just that. So my name is Dionne J. Davis. And here's another interesting tidbit. On my dad's side, I'm actually a double Davis. So my grandmother's maiden name was Davis, and they're not related, even though they were from the same part of Virginia. So my grandmother's maiden name was Davis, and my grandfather's name obviously was Davis. And then to really, show you that the stars aligned, putting Patricia and Owen together. My mother's maiden name is Dais, D-A-I-S. Her middle name, well, I won't say it because she doesn't like it and is embarrassed by it, but her middle initial is V. So you just put the V in the middle of Dais and you've got Davis. So like she didn't have to change her initial, she didn't have to change her signature hardly, nothing, and out she comes. So yeah, I've always found that interesting, especially because Dais is kind of obscure. It's Portuguese. And yes, it's not very common. Usually in Spanish and Portuguese, they use Diaz, or you know what I mean. So that always intrigued me. But yeah, that's it. Dionne J. Davis.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
That was quite a journey. Thank you. Wow, just learned so much. Oh, this is good.
Oh, wait, can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Also the meaning of my name. So like I said, it's ancient Greek mythology. In mythology, like the proper pronunciation, I believe, is Dionne. And of course it's Greek, so it's not written Dionne. But the original spelling is with one N. And in Greek mythology, Dionne was a titaness. So she was like the precursors of the actual Olympus gods, like Zeus and them. And Zeus, so it's kind of like it was Zeus's aunt in a sense. And she made Aphrodite. So she's Aphrodite's mother. And the meaning is divine goddess or queen. So I've always loved that about my name. And that was like when I was small, you know, people mispronounce it. And I know we're going to get into that part later, but like I found a lot of solace in the meaning of it. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't let people degrade it because I knew what it meant, you know, and I guess that's what started me getting into etymology and specifically names, is that, you know, I like to be able to defend it.
Oh, that's powerful.
It is. Yeah.
Is it me?
It is your turn, yeah.
Okay. My story could be like days long, so I could be very short. It's a little bit of the two of you, actually, interestingly enough. So my name is Niwaeli, even though the majority of the world calls me Niwa. I'm my ancestors, well, dreams, but also everything else. I am my ancestor. Sorry, guys, that was just easy.
Yes.
I'm a namesake of my paternal grandma, and that's a traditional practice of the firstborn. So if I was a boy, I would be my paternal grandpa's name. So my brother who follows me is my paternal grandpa's name. So that's my name. I was born only as Niwaeli Baruja. So Baruja is the family name, which is a weird hybrid of like Western naming family culture, you know, the way you take on like a family name to have a generational name. So that's like my great grandpa first name, Baruja. So yeah, I didn't have a middle name. However, I ended up having a middle name later on as a result of migrating and confusion and becoming Black in Australia. But that's a story for maybe later. So I do have a middle name, but I wasn't born with it. It just somehow ended up in my name, and it's my father's first name, similar to Faduma. But it's not really my middle name. It's a weird assimilation situation story.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so my name gets to know the name.
I forgot to say what my name means. So Niwaeli, Niwa means like I belong to, or it's like a possessive sort of phrase. You can say I belong to something, or I am someone something. So Niwa is that, which doesn't mean much by itself, actually. Eli is God. I presume this is Christian God, because my grandma was born in the 1920s, and I don't think she was named after someone else. And I say that instinctively because Christian God came with the missionaries and colonialism, so it could have been other gods, you know, indigenous gods, but who knows? I think it's Christian God. So I'm God's child, basically, or I belong to God.
Beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I need a sip of my tea first. No, I kid. So what I'm commonly known as is Wanyikam Sheila. I have a nickname in there, which is Nyx. So anyone who's known me from childhood and long-term friends, yeah. So Nyx and Sheila. However, I do have a government name. So actually, let me start before it slips out of my mouth. Let me start. I was named. Why are we all laughing? This is not a laugh. This is a very serious matter.
No.
So anyway, I was named after my grandmother, and like Niwa, we name from the paternal side first, but what we do is we alternate. So the firstborn will be from the paternal side, and then the secondborn from the maternal. So then that way everyone gets a turn to get named. So my official names from my grandmother are Felicia Wanyika. And Mshila is my father's name, although technically Mshila shouldn't be my last name because I should take on my granddad's name, but somehow in the stylizing of my name, and I don't know how, I was speaking to my siblings, I'm like, how did it end up that I'm the only one who had Mshila and everyone else had Madeda, which is my dad's name, and we cannot figure out. So it was put down to just me being me and being my crazy self. And so that's my official name. So yeah, but when you come Sheila is it. So for the longest time, and I don't use Felicia, and I don't know, it's not for any particular reason. Yes, there's a by Felicia bit that we're always laughing about. But the fact that it comes from my grandma, I love it. And because I didn't meet my grandma, so I do appreciate and love it. But just who I am, the essence of who I am, I just don't feel like it's me. So Wanyika tends to be the name that I use. Yeah. Almost everywhere, unless I have to officially produce documents. Like Faduma will attest, we traveled once and we were at the airport. Maybe I should let you tell this story.
Well, we were at the airport, we were traveling, and this is Wanika. She's been my best friend for, I don't know, 10, 12 plus years now. I thought we know each other. So it was interesting. We were doing a check-in and they've asked for passports and they said, all right, Felicia. And I went, whoo. Who is Felicia? I said, this is Wanika. But it turns out, we learned a lot about each other that trip because I do have a variation to my name. So we both learned our other names. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah.
And different reasons, yes.
I wonder also if it's very cultural to have a government name. Like in terms of, we all have sort of, I guess, different names, but then you also have your government name. Yeah.
And for me, I find it really interesting because if I got it from my grandma, that means like at that point, that was already ingrained into our culture. But I'm not surprised because I'm from the coastal part of Kenya, which is where a lot of people came in. So our culture is very mixed and we've taken on a lot, whether it's from names to, different cultures, food, dress, and that sort of thing. So probably that's how it came across. So I'm not sure if further inland, whether people still had that naming convention way back then, like your grandma, great grandma, would she have had an English government name? Yeah. So I should stop calling it government name, an English name.
It's your name. Yeah. I mean, we all have quite distinctive names, and I'm wondering, does anyone want to talk about any mispronunciations that you've encountered in your life with your names?
Oh my gosh. Hopefully my asthma will chill out because it was bugging. But so I went to all girls private school in a suburb of Baltimore. There were only 2 Black girls in the original class. The original class, I believe, was 114 or 110. And then when we graduated, I think it was slightly less. But still, only 2 Black girls in the class. I was the smart one, and the other one was not. So that was how we were distinguished. At my graduation, I won a couple awards. And at the rehearsal, we had this elderly nun who was our headmistress. And at rehearsal, she said my name just fine. At actual graduation, and of course, it was when I was getting my diploma, not when I was getting one of my awards, she mispronounced my name, Dionne Davis. And she's very fortunate that she was probably in her 80s. Like, if not, I mean, you know how those people age, but either she was in her 80s or close to, and she had a facial deformity because of cancer. So those were the only 2 things. Her age and her deformity were the only things that saved her. But my mother, to this day, she will tell you that my face was a mask of rage. I was so angry because it's like, it's at that point, it has to be purposeful because she wasn't failing yet, despite her age. like there was no other explanation for it, because it had to be intentional, like she knew my name, like she's known me for 4 years, yeah. So like, she's, if she hadn't been elderly and infirm, she would have been tackled, but it was her lucky day. And I mean, that was almost, oh shucks, it has been, it was 30 years ago, and I still remember that feeling, because it's such an insult, because it's not like, a lot of times I with ethnic names or Black names or African names, they always like to say how difficult they are, but they're not. A lot of times they're like, I studied Japanese briefly, and that was actually one of the awards I won. I won the Japanese award. In Japanese, it's very syllabic, and it's like math. Like this sound plus this sound will always make this sound. And a lot of African names are like that as well, where this sound and this sound will always make this sound. And they're much more simple than a lot of Latin-based sounds and names, like the Romance languages, or, don't get me started on Eastern European languages or some other Asian languages outside of Japanese, where they have all these rules and that sort of stuff. So like, if you could say Dostoevsky, you could say Dionne, you could say Faduma, you could say Niwa, you could say Wanika. It's not rocket science, and I think, like, I'm glad that the way that my parents raised me and the way that they equipped me to where, like I said before, I could defend my name because I knew it had a meaning, and I know we're going to get into like Black names and like inventions and that sort of stuff. But like, I don't want it to be classist or elitist, but knowing that my name wasn't just some invention that my mother did in the delivery room, meant something to me. You know what I mean? And not to say that those names aren't valuable, but just in the sense of, how can't you pronounce a name that has been anglicized from ancient Greek? If this is your Western culture, you know what I mean? My name should be easy. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice.
Similar to you.
Of like teachers and care and lack of care, and how, especially as a kid, how that can leave a really lasting print in your mind.
Yeah.
Sorry, Faduma.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, similar to you, I've had people obviously in different parts of life mispronounced my name. And I think, just echoing what you were saying, Dionne, it's very important that you have the opportunity for your parents to really instill that, the understanding of your name and who you are, where you come from. And we're very lucky to have had that, so that we are able to be assertive and able to correct people and let them know what your correct pronunciation of your name is, which is really, really important. I have not an Anglo name, so slightly unique name. So I get people all the time asking me, look, they call me Fatima. I sort of just politely go, it's actually Faduma, but or Fatima, and I go, it's actually Faduma. I've had people ask me, look, do you have an English name? This could, or can I call you F? Can we just, stick with F? And I just go, no, you cannot call me F, and I do not have an English name. It's Faduma. I suggest you learn it.
I mean, it's literally Faduma. Like,
it's not that hard. And I guess not the worst part, but the part that I guess is frustrating, and probably everyone, globally can relate to this, is when you're ordering coffee. Okay, and I know this is probably a very first world problem, but sometimes I've sat at coffee shops or stood waiting for my coffee, and I hear this random name in like Fafafina or Fifina, and I think, who's that? First, it turns out that it's me, because they were mispronounced my name, but that's all right. Yeah. But oftentimes I find I find that people can be sometimes, I guess, lazy in my experience when they ask you for what is the English name. But I appreciate that there are certain populations that do have an English name, so that it makes it easier for them. So I appreciate where that can come from. Having said that, I think it's equally important, like Dionne said, that there are various different names that are considered longer or different to your average English names. And I think it's important that people respect that.
When you mentioned the coffee, Faduma, it reminded me, I have a friend who's Brazilian. His name is Renato, which isn't a difficult name. It's an Italian name. It's an old name. You know, it's not hard at all. He actually takes photos of what they write on the cup, and he's done it for years and years and years. And I can't even imagine how many different ways people have of messing up Renato. Like, like again, it's like your name, 3 syllables, Renato.
That's right.
Really simple.
Yeah, but look, having said that, I think it's not something that I take offense to. I think it's just something that's, you know, funny to sometimes note the different variation. I appreciate that people who work in coffee shops often are very busy. It's peak hour when you're ordering coffee, you know, so I appreciate that they're just doing their best and trying to get your name. So I take it more on the humorous side and think, oh wow, this is a different, you know, spelling of the name. But so yeah.
Oh, so diplomatic.
I like how, yeah,
I know,
I like how
so
gracious. You're so gracious with that, you know.
So gracious. That's exactly what I thought.
Sometimes I wonder whether people are already making assumptions before you even walk up to them. Like you walk up to make your order coffee and they already go like, you're going to have a difficult name. So for me, my go-to coffee name is Veronica, because it sounds very much like Wanika. So if they're calling it out, when I hear the car, I'll be like, oh yeah, that's me. That's Veronica.
I love
and
it.
There's been lots of times when people will be like, they'll be there and they're like, yeah, Veronica. And they're looking at me like waiting for a more difficult name to come out. And I'm like, spell it like Veronica, just like it sounds, you know, kind of thing. But every once in a while, I'll go like, yeah, I've reached a point where now when I'm giving my actual name, I don't say it, I spell it first.
Yes, so do I.
So because I'm like, you're gonna ask me to spell it or you're gonna butcher it. So no. So now it's like, yeah, what's your name? And I just start. Let's spell it out. Then there's no mistakes. Then you can pronounce it. And then when they say it back to me, and then I make the effort to correct the pronunciation, and then we move on. Yeah.
Yeah, I just use Davis. Like I don't if it's that sort of scenario where I have to give them my name, you know, for service reasons, Davis.
Just keeping it, yeah.
It's universality. I always laugh. I was just telling a friend, I think at the start of the week, that my name is not even Niwa anymore. And Niwa became Niwa because I got tired of my name being butchered, actually. I was always Niwa only at home. So it was my intimate name. And then I had to give it to the world because I started mispronouncing my own name. It was just too messy. I was like, nope, I'm sick and tired of hearing my own name mispronounced so often that I'm mispronouncing my own name now because I'm identifying with the mispronounced names. So I just gave Niwa to the world. And it was always my home name. But what's funny now is that I was just telling a friend, like literally 3 days ago, that it's no longer Niwa, I'm Niwa, Niwa.
Yeah.
When does it end?
Yeah.
It's like you feel into a rhythm.
It's that assumption of it's going to be difficult. But okay, so ladies, I'm sure we can be on this for ages. So let me take us on a different tangent, and let's just see. So with your names, right, is there any significance to your name, like say your first name? And we may have touched this, say for example, to determine marriage lineages, historical class systems, and maybe this is more so Faduma, because given how you list out your clan, grandfather. So is there any significance there?
Yeah. So it's interesting when you were mentioning different types of names before. So my last name Geddi, it means travel, or so anyone who was born during travel. So my grandfather was born during travel. So Geddi actually means travel or traveler. So that's my last name. But in terms of having your names, the the ones that I mentioned before, is very specific to my culture, religion, but also clans. So Somalia has a number of clans. So it's a way of you have all these different names and way of for you to identify who your people are and what areas do you come from as well. So you could go to, the village that your great grandmother was born in, for example, and you could just write your name and people will be able to tell you, oh, so you're connected to so and so. So it's a way of also connecting to the cultural areas that you come from. So we have different names for people, city, coastal areas, but it's also to connect to the specific clan and your family as well. Which is really, really important.
I have a similar, sort of similar way to the last names and how we are named. So it's very much clan identification. So you can tell where people are from. So, but in that, the interesting thing is also, because I'm from a very small tribe called Taita. So we've also got names that are descriptive, like I've got an uncle called Makelele, which in Swahili means a noisemaker. And he's really that. He's the life of the party. There's very descriptive names, but also clan related. And there's a story, because the name Sheila, it will identify the clan that I'm from. So in terms of marriage and lineages, because we're such a small tribe, it used to be like you cannot marry from somebody from the same clan. There's no intermarriage and things like that. So my personal story is I was once dating someone called Mshila, and the Mshila name is very rare. It's not a common name. So automatically we were like, are we related? We didn't think so, but somehow his parents got wind that we were dating, and they were like, oh no, actually you are related, so you can't be dating. And we were like, no, at this time you're 18, 19, you're just thinking like, no, this is the love of my life. Of course, like, what do we need to do to break this? And we looked like, we had kind of checked, and we're like, so being a small tribe, you're either related through blood or through marriage, and you'll find a lot of that, right? So anyway, so it turns out if we were related through blood, the tradition was that you'd have to slaughter a sheep in order to cut the blood ties.
Oh, wow.
But if it's through marriage, then there's other things. No. If it's through marriage, you can do that. You slaughter a sheep to cut the blood ties. Okay. But then if it's through blood, then you cannot. So very interesting time where we're like, we really need to learn more about, and because we are named after, like grandparents and things like that. So it's easy to tell, cousins and things like that. But that's
important. It's I think something that I really take pride in and just find so beautiful is that you're able to connect exactly like with the names that we have. You're able to, like I said, you could go to the most, the remotest town or village and say, I am so and so, and this is my full 9 names, and people will be able to pick and say, yes, we know your great grandfather, or you're connected to so and so. So that's it's beautiful that we have these names that are able to also connect us, but as well as identify us as well where we come from.
And
that's one of the things. Sorry.
Can you intermarry within those lineages? Like if you went and found somebody who along the way has 5 out of your 7 names?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you can. Yeah.
Like that's one of the things that, being Black American is like so hard because we don't have that, and it's like we were robbed of that. And that like, so like Davis it's usually a lot, it's either it's an abbreviation of David's son in like English, or it was a derivative of Saint David, but like we don't have that for the most part. And like again, like I've always been into names, and I remember being probably a teenager and thinking every Black person in the US who's descended from chattel slavery, your last name should either be Blackman, which is my one of my antecedents' names. She was her surname was Blackman, or Freeman or Friedman. Like I'm like, you should have one of those 3. Like, and just reset the slate and start from there. Because like you know, it's like, it's sort of, it's the legacy of that, you know. So, but prior to meeting Dan, I was going about becoming a mother on my own. And I had decided, because Dionne is also a surname, and I was like, you know, if I have a child, that's what their surname. It was the French surname. I'm like, that's what their name would be. That'll be there's famous quintuplets in Canada in the 40s or 30s, the Dionne quintuplets. And then there's a Washington Post, I think he's still with the Washington Post, a writer named E.J. Dionne. And of course there's Celine, but she doesn't spell it my way. But like, you know, like it's a not common, but it's not an obscure surname. So I was like, okay, that's what I'll do. Like, you know, their surname will be Dionne, because I like that tradition of like Nordic nations where they do like Sven's daughter or Sven's son, you know, and that sort of thing. So I'm like, I kind of dig that, and just sort of taking back my agency as someone who, you know, because like, you know, Davis on my dad's side goes back a good ways, you know what I mean? And so, you know, but obviously that means that we belong to somebody named Davis. So
Tracy. Before Niwa goes on to the next question, I'll just read a couple of comments from people who've joined us. So we've got Ijabo, hey babes. And so this was her comment way back when Faduma was reciting all her names, and she was like, we also do this when we are trying to hype ourselves up. I'm like, I can see that.
I like that.
You say your entire name. That's right.
Every name.
Listen, I say it every day. Every day.
That's inspired me. I'm like, maybe I should speak to my dad and just, you know, add that to my
list them.
Yeah, I love that.
And then we've got Babji. Hey Babs, thanks for joining. So this was I think her response might have been when we were talking about how our names get mispronounced. And she's like, at school during roll call, when the teacher has been calling out names and then she stops dead on her tracks, and you just raise your hand and she skips the name right there and then. These things, we can laugh at them now, but you know, as Nia pointed out, like it can be traumatic from a young age, and something that carries you, you know.
And to think that an adult would think that's okay, you know what I mean? An adult who is going to be with you 9-10 months of the year, you know what I mean? Like, says a lot.
That's deep,
no. I think there was another comment from Jiva, an amazing friend, saying he just says diva. Jiva, like diva.
Like diva. Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Right on.
Spot on.
But I think it's been really good for us to ground ourselves in like this sharing, and also especially in the sharing from that place of pride, of knowing who we are. Because the reality is that for many of us, once you have a distinctively other name, actually there's a lot of negative associations that you can navigate through life purely because of your name. And yes, like we've made a lot of progress, especially in the Western world, around, you know, laws that stop from discriminating race, ethnicity, age, but you know, there's that insidious thing of unconscious bias. And we thought we'd just share something that was actually just released on Smart Company literally this past week. And it was this reporter who went on and did an analysis of 123 resume studies across 18 countries. Resume studies are this thing that whereby like by researchers go and like apply. They sort of fake an application with different names and to see where they land, and they gather a whole bunch of intel. And Western, like a lot of countries, including Australia, Canada, France, Germany, the US. And I just wanted to share some of the findings, because these are the things that people have lived experience with, and oftentimes they feel like, oh, I don't know how to prove it, but it's really well documented research, and it just really proves a lot. So one of the like really high statistics is that more than 90% of the studies, remember 123 across 18 countries, identified high ethnic discrimination in recruitment. So this is about recruitment processes, right? And on average, they're calling them ethnic minority applicants, which is an interesting terminology, but that's what it is, received about half as many positive responses to their job applications. And what was most interesting for me was that there was a similar degree of discrimination, right, against or between migrants who are like the ones who've migrated to the country and their native born children and then the second generation. Because what that implies and suggests and supports perhaps is that it's not really about your experience, because if you're second gen or first gen, you've studied in that country, they can see your education that is local, they can assume now that you sound like them, blah, blah, blah. So it suggests that it's really just your name. Like, because there is a very small difference between those applicants. Like, so my children's children might have a very similar discriminatory landscape as myself, right? Purely because of the name. So knowing what we know, I just wanted to sort of hear about your own experiences. Do you have any experience with name-based discrimination, particularly in the recruitment process, and also that you're aware of, and how did you navigate it? Because we're not always aware really. Go on, Faduma.
Yeah, well, yes, I have. I have absolutely experienced it. I can tell you that for a fact. I guess feedback that I've been given is I've actually applied for jobs and used a different name and gotten a call for a job interview, and then used my own name and haven't received a call for a job interview. Wow. For a same organization, same company. And I guess the feedback that I've received from various people that I've spoken in Australia in the recruitment sector is that I've been given feedback that because I have a foreign name, Faduma Geddi, people often don't know whether it's a male or female. So when they're looking at your job application, they might go, well, I'm not quite sure, is this a man or a woman that's going to come for the interview? So one of the biggest feedback that I received is to add a title like whether you're Miss or Mrs. or so that your potential recruiter would know, oh, this is a woman or this is a man. I've also been advised to add in my CV that I'm a citizen, so to make sure that it's there, so that potential recruiters won't look at your CV and think, oh, this is the person who's on a working visa. They might be going soon, or they might have some restrictions within their working rights in Australia. And what's other things that I've received? Also, yes, to add languages spoken, obviously speak different languages, is to also add that English is my first language into your CV. So these are some of the things that you'd imagine that other people haven't experienced, that's just solely based on your name, which is really, really unfortunate.
It's wild that they feel comfortable saying that they don't know if you're a man or a woman. What job requires you to be one or the other? Absolutely. Like, how are you just going to admit to gender-based discrimination right there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
That's right. So that's, I guess, some of the feedback that I've received just in, along the way, working in Australia. So, which is, really, really shame, because you have to be really considerate in how you present yourself, but you really don't have a choice. I often find that the better way to go about that, especially for companies that championship, diversity and inclusion, is to really have a process where you can submit your application, and that information in terms of your name would be withheld, so that you do get an opportunity where people do not have there's no chance for unconscious bias. And that you are then given an opportunity to interview based on how you answered the application questions, and if your CV matches any of the transferable skills required for the role that you're applying for. If there was such a system that was used, then you can, in my opinion, truly say that you champion diversity and inclusion, because you are giving people an opportunity from the get-go. So that's something that frustrates me. I find that a lot of people or companies say we champion diversity and inclusion, but I want to look at, well, if that is the case, how do you do it from the beginning?
Yeah. Well, I can't say that I've ever been aware of it, because in the US, Dionne is typically a Black girl's name. And the most famous Dionnes are all Black. But yeah, so I've never confronted it, you know what I mean? And so I can't really say that I've missed out on opportunities because, you know, like I'm completely unaware, but, you know, for a very good time, you know, it was only when I was with my last corporation did I not advance as I expected. So I'm just gonna say that it never was an issue for me. But that may be because, you know, the laws are very strict, you know, in the US. And, you know, I'm young enough that, you know, there had been a lot of progress in that area prior to when I entered the workforce. So I think I profited from that because, you know, it was never an issue. Like, I mean, your name would have to be, you know, I replaced ghetto with trailer park because I refuse, you know, like I refuse to make ghetto us. So if your name was noticeably trailer park, then yeah, you might have trouble. But if your name is even a little bit mainstream, you're not really going to run into that in the US. Now, that being said, in Australia, I think they're probably more European Dionnes or Anglo Dionnes than there are Black Dionnes. So I'm interested because I'm in the process of starting to re-enter the workforce after being a stay-at-home parent. You know, I think it might actually work to my advantage down here that this is a name that, you know, white girls have. So I'm almost tempted to misspell my surname as Davies because that's more Anglo than Davis is. And see what I get with Dionne Davis.
Keep us posted. Interestingly, Dionne, in this analysis of resume studies, one of the like really stark things that was presented on it was actually that there were large differences of like degree of discrimination across the different studies. And one of the highest, and it was like the second highest, was African-American names in the US. So like it was a distinctively high rate of discrimination, like those names within their own country. And it was like 40-something%, you know, proven sort of like.
Oh yeah, so just like I said, if it was a trailer park name, you know, or what they would consider, you know, like, oh yeah, if they can definitely identify it, like even though Dionne is considered a Black name, it's not a negative connotation as a Black name. You know what I mean? It's a good one, a safe one. But if my name had been Shaniqua, hell yeah, you know, like it would have been, you know, it would have been a struggle for sure. Daquan, you know, I actually made a list of like, you know, Black names, Black American names, but like my list is for my generation because like I don't really know, you know what I mean? I know what was popular when I was young. But I did also like do like some of the prefixes and suffixes where you could say, okay, yeah. I know what that kid looks like.
Yeah, that's interesting. So can you share with us a little bit about that and like sort of the culture behind that
sure,
sort of naming?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, like, of course, during chattel slavery, you know, we had no choice, you know, and the enslaved Africans who were right off the boat, you know, they knew their name, you know, their real name, and maybe first generation, but after that, you know, that was lost because I mean, it was literally beaten and tortured out of you, you know, like our culture was wrenched from us. So when we were able to name, and I think that also ties into how important nicknames are to us, because a lot of times your nickname's more important than your government name, because, you know, when they first started doing that, like, yeah, you had the name that they called you, but you had your Niwa, you know what I mean? Like, and I like, like you had your home name, you had the name that people that love you call you. But then once, you know, we were able to put names onto the birth certificates, and we were part of that system, then many Black Americans decided to create names, and make them up wholesale or remix them, where they take a mundane word, like a word that's not a name, just a common word, and make it a name. Like, for instance, there's a story, and I remember being younger and laughing at it, but actually, it's not funny. A young woman who was illiterate a Black woman gave birth to a daughter, and she decided to call her Famale, which is female. But yeah. And now as an adult, as a parent, I'm like, oh, you know what I mean? So we do stuff like that. We'll change a letter. For instance, TLC, the T is for Tion. That's Dionne with a T instead of a D. You know what I mean? One of Nick Cannon's many children, his latest batch, the twins, one I think is Zion, but the other one is Zillion. So of course my mother was like, Zillion. But in his case, I'm pretty sure it's like million, zillion.
Money.
Yeah, exactly. It's about money. But again,
very innovative.
Just switching it up. Another, I have a girlfriend. Her first son is named Vuitton. So we'll use brand names like Louis Vuitton. But she didn't spell it the proper way. She spelled it Vaton, but it's still Vuitton. You know what I mean? My neighbor will mispronounce a word and make it a new name. Like, so his name is Juan, Juan, which is John in Spanish. His name was Juwan. We'll do stuff like add Shah or Shay, and it's still spelled SHA as a prefix or suffix to the word. We'll add D, as a suffix, Daquan, or another one is add QUA as a prefix or a suffix, Shaniqua, we'll add La as a prefix, and I mean, some of those names have become, commonplace, LaTanya, LaToya, LaWanda, but some of them is they just added La to whatever they felt like adding La to. Another one is, I thought of was Ya as a or Ya as a suffix. Then you'll do like royalty or God names like King, Messiah, Princess, Prince. You know what I mean?
Yeah, as a suffix is Ghanaian.
Is it?
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
I don't know which tribe, but it's Ghanaian. Yeah.
It is.
When you can connect it. When anything that can connect us to the motherland, I'm all about that. Then they like to take names from like Arabic and Yoruba and Ashanti, you know what I mean? Like a name like Khadija, which is Arabic, you know what I mean? But like when I was growing up, Tanisha was a name. So that's got Sha in it. Keisha, very popular. And then a lot of times, and I noticed this mainly with boys, is they'll take another a European ethnic name like Anthony, Dante, pardon me, Andre, which is French, but like there was a lot of that, especially in the 70s. But like always,
bless you,
we're making it ours.
That's so beautiful.
No, there's poor thing. There's a real freedom and inventiveness to that, as far as
it's very innovative. I love that, and it's making things your own, and creating your own subculture. Well, not even sub, but your own culture. Truly,
What I wrote down, making it ours. Like sort of like just especially like when we like remix something, like okay, that is a name. I like that.
And very distinctive. Oh my gosh.
And then of course, Oh, sorry.
You go.
Of course, like when you get into religions, like when people convert to Islam, as Black Americans or Judaism even, and then they'll take on a Muslim or Hebrew name.
Yeah. Yeah, we do that. Yeah, even across the continent, we do that as well. When you come a religious name, it's just amazing. We are like really tracking along with this time. We're way over time.
So we suspected this might happen.
But maybe you can just quickly give us a picture if there's like an element of class that intersects with that sort of, with the names, like in culturally speaking.
Well, for Black Americans, 100%. Because if you were light-skinned, so you had more admixture, and from a wealthier background, because we have a whole class of Black people who, according to the laws of hypodescent or the one drop rule, are considered Black, but if you, phenotypically, and then also if you get into their parentage, if you break it down, their parents were mixed and their grandparents were mixed, and so they're probably mixed race and not really Black. But because of the way things were set up and the way white supremacy delusion works, they're Black. But there's been that class for, since before slavery ended, where, they were the children of the enslavers and the offspring, and, and they bred and they only, bred with people who were similar. So, by the time slavery is over and by the early 20th century, they were going to college, they, had property, they, and they would never have any of these names. You know what I mean? They had names like my father does, very Anglo, very pretentious, so there's definitely a lot of class involved. And I mean, as much as we're trying to get away from respectability politics, or at least some of us are, there is that, that disdain for those names, or made up names, and it's like, well, you named your child Carter, you know what I mean? And you're proud of that, and but you're looking down on a Shaniqua. It's like, that name does not, have any more value just because it came from Anglo culture,
Absolutely.
So there, and I mean, and people still engage in that, like when you're having a baby and somebody's like, oh, well, don't name them this, or don't, and I mean, instead of just going like, because like I'm a firm believer, like I don't really like I appreciate how your cultures do the naming, but like I feel like every child should have their own name, you know what I mean? That's unique to them. Like, and I know my dad resents being a third. Like, I mean, although now he is an Owen, there's no disputing that he's an Owen, but he wasn't born an Owen, and actually that's another funny story. And this brings in other stuff. And I know we're way over, so I'll hurry up. But my grandmother wanted to name my father Reginald. Right. And she was going to change it. So his name was going to be Reginald Owen. And I was like, that's a great name. The white nurse at the hospital just wouldn't she wouldn't spell it correctly. Like she wouldn't because, and of course she could make the decision that, oh, this kid is going to be Owen Walker Davis III, because I'm not letting her name him Reginald. You know what I mean? Just because of whatever her mood was, or that she liked Owen better, or whatever it was. So she literally would not write it properly. And so, of course, my grandmother wasn't stupid. She's not going to let her misspell or miswrite the name. And she's like, okay, well, then like there's no way that you could get around misspelling what his father's name is. So he's a third.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a shame that they wielded such power over your grandmother at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. Whew.
Yeah, like can you imagine thinking that you could deny someone a name?
Yeah. The powers of. Okay. So just in the interest of time, I might go on to our last question, and then we can throw in any other thoughts that might have floated into your mind as we're doing this, and I'll see if there's any comments. But unless Nua, you felt otherwise, is there like a way you can succinctly ask the last question? Because it's so deep, we would be here for another half hour. So I'm like, instead of not giving it,
we can have a one-line sentence response.
Sorry?
Okay.
We can respond with like a sentence or two.
Okay, to that, before we get to the last question.
Oh, no, to the last question.
Oh, to the last question. Oh, yeah. No, I skipped the second last one because I'm like, it's such a weighty question that I would want to, not give it, the weight it deserves. But so, ladies, excuse me, what advice would you give someone who's facing challenges with their names? So be it mispronunciation, discrimination, having to change the names to assimilate. We didn't even touch on that, but as I said, it was such a long conversation, or anything that we've covered tonight. Someone's just feeling a bit like, I get where you guys are coming from. Like, my name has been mispronounced so many times. It's maybe don't have the courage to, correct someone. Yeah. What kind of advice would you give?
And you've probably given it, but just for the sake of repeating.
Wrapping it all up in a bow.
in Australia or the US, in an English language country, they would have to refer to me by my title and my surname. If you're trying to play games and you don't want to say Dionne properly, and you're trying to call me D, which is my home name, you know what I mean? Like, not anybody can call me D. And the way Australians just abbreviate everything, no, I'm not your D. My name's Dionne. And if you can't, it's like Janet Jackson. It's Miss Jackson if you're ignorant. it's Miss Davis if you don't have any sense. So there you go. You want to play games, Miss Davis.
Absolutely.
And I don't care if exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my advice would be to really, I guess, if you're struggling, when Nico was saying before, with your name, or getting quite frustrated with people not pronouncing your name correctly, or unable to, I guess, find a job, or really get through with your name, and considering changing your name, or perhaps adding an English name. My advice would be to really understand the background of your name, if you can, or speak to family, if there is an opportunity to do so. But I think also it's important, if you can, and this is very individual, to stick to the name that you have, because our names are very much tied to your identity. And so I think for me personally, I wouldn't change my name to assimilate or to fit in. However, I can understand that it can be more difficult for others who haven't had the same opportunities, or a family or the background that I come from, where names are very intricate and very important. But I think that given that it's so much tied to our identity, you should stay with the name that you have. You are the only person with that name, and it's so intrinsically tied to your identity. I think that when you let people know what your name is, you're also allowing them to refer to you in a particular way, like Dionne said before, and allow people to have respect for your name as well. So, but I do understand that some people might feel differently, and especially if you're new in the country and you have a quite foreign sounding name, it can assist. And it might be easier. Having said that, personally, I feel that it's really important, because it's something that grounds you. It's who you are. It's who you've been prior to entering these environments and countries where English is the first language. So I think there's power in that.
Yeah. Thank you. Ms. Niwaeli?
I don't think I have anything to add. You've both hit it on the nail. Just, I think it's broader. It's about identity. It's about knowing who you are, standing in your truth. So if that's manifesting in the challenges that you have with your name, I think it's everyone's personal journeys. And I appreciate we're not equals, but it's worth it, is all I can say. I had a full-on journey with trying to run away from all my names and some of my names, but you've got to come back to yourself, and however how that looks like, and it can include changing it, but you've got to come back to you, because no one else is you. So that's your power.
Amen.
And for myself, to just wrap it all up, and it's things that we've touched on in different spaces during this conversation, would probably be, if you're in a position to make it aware to organizations that you're working at. Like someone pointed out, if you're a champion of diversity and inclusion, this is probably something that's not spoken about. People are not aware of the impact that names have. They are aware that people are changing their names to come into interviews and things like that, but they don't realize the impact, the flow-on effect it has on that. So if you're in that position, just say it, to whoever will listen. If you're in a position to make a difference, do so as well. And encourage things like the blind interviews, where look at the person's, position based on merit and not the names, just little things like that, I feel like can go a long way. And as we started this discussion, we had mentioned, we are hoping that these conversations push the dial forward 5-10 years from now. So 5 years from now, we don't want to be talking about how people can't pronounce our names. They're already assuming we've got difficult names. We want to be in positions where you're working in a space where, one, people have been socialized to learn how to pronounce names as a way of, as a business as usual, like we are getting into that space now where we are identifying ourselves by our pronouns, So in the same way, people are taking time to identify how you like to be addressed in that way. I feel like names should hold the same importance. And yes, I guess, I'll sum it up that way and leave it at that.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you. This was amazing.
It has been a pleasure. So we will be back sometime next month. And we have a plug. Monica, what's happening? It's not this conversation series, but what else is happening?
Take this opportunity to plug our next adventures. Both you ladies are already all across this, but we are so excited. We'll be hosting an exhibition, the first textile exhibition of its kind, and like this artist is somebody we admire so much. She's a surface and textile designer, and her inspiration it's near and dear to us because it's East African, it's a coastal culture, her inspirations, but just working with her, you just realize she's such a pure creative. She just comes up with stuff and like, how do you do this? So we're really excited to be showcasing her work, and Niwa will have the details of dates, time, space.
It's in my calendar, July 2nd.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, July 2nd to 4th. Yeah, it's in Surrey Hills. It'll be COVID safe. And we're really looking forward to it. We've got a public program. We've thought of parents with kids as well, because part of what we want to do as well is education and educating our own culture and things like that. And not just us, but the next generation. So we've been very mindful. It's not only an exhibition, but everything around it. Like, we've really been intentional about everything. From the minute you walk into that exhibition and walk out, there's something for everybody. And that's something I can say we're really proud of, and something that we want to push forward.
I'm so proud of you guys.
Yeah. So yes, that's our plan.
Yay.
All right.
That was
awesome. Available. So I'll link that somewhere over there.
Yes, please.
For now, thank you both so much. Faduma Geddi, Dionne Davis, you have been amazing, and you will continue to be amazing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, ladies. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate you.